Good morning, Johannesburg. I'm Kathryn Williams, founder of KMINT Business and Pricing Consultancy in Australia. And working with agencies and their clients, brand owners and business partners all over the world, I'm very excited to be presenting to you today a topic which is dear to my heart about how much are your big ideas worth. So I'm going to look at it from three perspectives: from brand owners, return on investment; agencies, the revenue streams that you're generating from your tools of trade, your big ideas; and actually for every single one of us in the audience who come up with ideas and write things down every day, the intellectual property, the intangible assets that we are creating every single day. So I thought I'd start with why ideas and this topic is so relevant today. And it's essentially because we've moved from our farming era through to our manufacturing era, and then the information technology era, and now we are in the knowledge industry. The knowledge economy is big business. You only have to watch the news to see that Elon Musk is about to spend $44 billion to buy Twitter, and there is not a single tangible asset in that business. It's just fascinating, and this is the world we are in now. So learning about it is extremely relevant for all of us. So I thought I'd start with the tangible and intangible differentiation. Tangible assets are ones we can see and touch, like a house, a car, or your mobile phone. Intangible assets are products of your mind, and until they come out of your mind into a fixed and tangible medium, you can't see or touch them. Now, there are different categories of intangible assets. So we are going to focus on the brand assets, in particular copyrights and trademark, because these are relevant to all of us in the room. Unlike a tangible asset that goes along a production line, such as a car where we're adding in doors and wheels and other components along the way, an idea does go along a production journey in our head. And it's probably the years that you've been reading and watching movies and traveling and attending seminars that allows us to come up with the idea just like that in the meeting when a client puts a brief in front of us. But it's a bit tricky. So I thought to help us out, we'd use my Ideals Lifecycle model that will help us go through these 4 steps, where we'll start with, well, the idea itself, and then we'll learn how to protect it. Then we'll put a value on it, and then I'll show you how we commercialize the idea. Now, it's really important at this stage to point out that the idea itself is different to the production process of executing that idea. This idea on its own could be sold to you and you could execute it. So in the pitch scenario, a good idea executed poorly might not be as valuable as a brilliant idea executed well, or a not so great idea that's okay but executed beautifully. So a brilliant idea executed brilliantly will end up as a gold lion. So again, just distinguishing that I'm saying the idea here is different to the hours and time and materials to execute. So let's start with the idea. Here's a big idea. Back in 1995, when J.K. Rowling had this big idea about a boy wizard, she wrote it into a book, which became a copyright intangible property piece. She then had 7 books, 4 movies, a theme park, and merchandise sold all over the world. Her big idea is worth $1.1 billion in royalties every year. What about these 3 guys? In 2007, Brian, Joe and Nathan came up with a big idea to rent out airbeds to people coming to a conference in the States. They wrote it down, and their strategic document is copyright, intellectual property, bigger idea, worth a lot of money, $21 million these days. Here's another. It was a photograph that was taken back in 1984 of Michael Jordan. The copyrights of that original photo remain with the photographer. What we're looking at here is the trademark, which is now a valuable asset contributing. I think the Air Jordan or Michael Jordan division is worth 11% of the entire Nike overall business and integral to their marketing strategy, worth a lot of money. So the idea is the part that we need to look at first. It's the components, the elements, the individual facets that make that idea really valuable. So let's take a look. It's how we connect with our consumer. So the idea resonates with us as the consumer, the customer, when we use the senses. Number 1 is sight, visual recognition. Number 2 is sound. We also have scent, a very potent emotional sensory experience, touch, and also taste. You'll know them as trademarks, word marks, logos, taglines, and colour. Using the Nike example, you'll see the word, the name Nike, and the font, and the R in the registered circle means it's a registered trademark. The swoosh or the tick, as we know it, also a separate identifiable intellectual property asset registered with a trademark. And their tagline, "Just Do It," famous around the world for distinguishing their products against all others in the category. Now, originally when it started in 1964, Phil Knight and his coach, they had a business called Blue Ribbon Sports, and you'll see the R in a circle just above the S. And it's quite normal that as a business goes through its life cycle and matures, that a brand will evolve and the logos, the taglines will also evolve. So we saw the Nike word introduced, naming, and the swoosh or the tick used together as a composite or separate as individual assets. Coca-Cola, again, a familiar brand that we'll know. You'll see the R in a circle next to the name, Coca-Cola, and the font that is used is specific to them. The colour is their colour, and the ribbon underneath introduced as an asset later on. Unlike Nike Just Do It, one fantastic tagline, I think if I asked you what is the tagline or the slogan for Coca-Cola, you'd probably all give me a different answer. And that's because over time, Coca-Cola has many different slogans. And depending on when you first started drinking Coke, it's the one that will resonate most with you. Each of these individual intangible assets, valuable intellectual property. Oh, this little box needs no introduction. I'm sure you all know it as Tiffany. Now, the blue that is used here, Tiffany worked with the Pantone Institute to create their own special mix to differentiate their product packaging against all others in a very crowded luxury marketplace. And the result is the PMS 1837. It's 1837, which is the year that Tiffany was established. A different category altogether, chocolate. I'm going to the supermarket and I need to get some chocolate. I go down the aisle and I gravitate towards the aisle of purple, that sea of purple. Colour is used here to distinguish between the other confectionery products. And for me, Cadbury is honouring their promise to me that this will be a Cadbury's Dairy Milk chocolate, and I won't be disappointed. Other types of marks that are used more and more as creatives come up with ways to differentiate product and services are shape, sound, texture, taste, scent, as I mentioned, movement, and hologram. Here's the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle. Back to the confectionery aisle, Toblerone also uses shape, but also biscuits and even toothbrushes use shape marks to distinguish against others in their category. Very busy category of toothbrushes. Oops. So I wanted to also show you how sound works. I ran a webinar last year which was Power to the Jingle, and how powerful the audio mnemonics are. An audio log to your ear is like the visual logo is to your eye. Incredibly powerful. So I thought I might test you and see if you know these sonic sounds, these logos. Sonic sound for brand A. Now I'm thinking 74% of you will know that as the Nokia ringtone, because that's what the stats say. What about this one? 90% of you should recognize this one. I like this one particularly. It's Intel. Now, why I like it is because none of us have ever actually seen the product, yet we all probably know what that ringtone is, what their sonic logo is. Consistently used over time, we know that's Intel, which is apparently the chip inside that none of us have ever seen. Fascinating. Now, sonic sound C is something a little more local. Let's see if you know this one. It's MTN. And again, another way to powerfully distinguish products and services from the competitors. Texture is used, not as much, but here's an example in the crowded place of Scotch whisky, and Old Par have got the crackled glass on their bottle. Luxury brand Louis Vuitton, we're seeing a pattern, which is also a mark for Louis Vuitton, But the texture I want you to look at is the pebbled texture on their tote bags, which is 100% waterproof and very durable in a very crowded luxury marketplace. You would have thought that Chanel would have been successful in registering their scent for Chanel No. 5, but unfortunately, because of the subjective nature of perfume and the perfume deteriorating over time, it was unsuccessful. Yet in 2018, Hasbro was successful in America to register the vanilla scent of Play-Doh, so all is not lost. Movement is another one. This is a GIF which is registered, 28 of them in fact, bent leg jumps by Toyota. Oh, what a feeling. Another one in a different category, airlines, Jetstar have a jump as well. It's a straight leg jump, and they've registered 2 GIFs or marks to distinguish their products. Just another way again to resonate with the audience that you recognize this brand. Oh, and back to Intel. So here we're looking at a sticker. So if you are using a computer to watch this session today, you might have it on your PC. It's the hologram exterior or perimeter of that sticker, differentiating from all others. Again, we've probably never seen the chip, but that tells you it's inside. GlaxoSmithKline also use the hologram on their toothbrushes and Listerine. Again, just as another way that we're trying to connect and stand out for our consumers to pick our product or service. Now we understand the elements of the idea are really valuable. Which parts? We need to legally own them and protect them. This is another area that's a little bit tricky, so let me guide you through. It's really important to go and look at your contracts. So if you're an employee, you will be assigning the rights to all your intellectual property to your company. If you're a freelancer and a contractor, you will be assigning the rights across to your client. Getting this right gives you authority. For example, if I am the owner of the house, I have the key, I can put a fence around it, I control it, and I can sell it. You can see it because it's a tangible asset. If I'm a storekeeper, perhaps I'm selling jeans. These are my assets. I've got security tags on them. You can come in, you can try them on, you can touch them, they're tangible, but you can't take them from me because I've got a security guard at the front door of my shop as well. So this is different in the ideals world because intangible products, intellectual property out of your head, once you've seen my slide deck, once you've heard me tell you my big idea, it's really hard to unsee and unhear. So how do we protect our intangible assets, our big ideas? Well, there are legal regimes that are here to help us. So we've got the copyright regime, the trademark regime, design mark, patents, and trade secrets. So we're going to concentrate on copyright and trademark. The copyright is for copy, written words. So you'll see at the bottom of the slide there, I've used the copyright symbol C in a circle to indicate this is intellectual property of huge worth and value to myself, the owner, Kathryn Williams. If this was your company, it would say Kathryn Williams Proprietary Limited or Inc., and then the year that the asset was created. Trademarks are used for everything else that's not written as a script per se or music. So registered in a circle means it's gone through the process and it is formally registered and you are legally able to defend it against others. TM you should be using on everything that has not yet gone through the registration. It stands for trademark pending. And it should be used on all slogans, words, logos that you create, again, to indicate something of worth. If someone sat down just next to you now, and they were just sitting next to you in a suit, you wouldn't know that perhaps they are an FBI agent, unless they whip out their FBI badge. That's what these are. They're badges, signs, and symbols. Until you affix them to your work, nobody knows that this is intellectual property and worth something of value to you. Nobody knows it's yours, so you must use them. To show you how important this is, I've taken a screen grab from the World Intellectual Property Organization. So it's 2020 filings and there's 17.2 million trademarks across the globe, mostly in Asia and China in particular. And you can see the little gold highlight that I put there, that's us in Africa at 17.5%. So we've got a long way to go here to recognize these assets and register them. At the bottom of the slide, I've given you the reference there of the website to look at, iponline.cipc.co.za. Both of these websites have great details, great blogs, and will help us move that tiny little 1.5% up so that we actually do recognize the items that the intangible property we're creating, which is probably used globally. Here's the website that I mentioned. So this is ours, and you'll see up there in the top ribbon, the resources has got a drop-down menu for some great blogs and white papers and case studies. Maybe set up some internal professional development. Train your people to understand this. We are relevantly in the knowledge economy where big ideas are in use globally, and you need to learn how to protect them. Now that they're considered valuable, just how much are they worth, do you think? Let's have a look. I thought I'd start with the top 100. Now, Kantar is a brand valuation consultancy, and they value the top 100 in their Brand Z publication every year. And in 2022, they have ranked Apple, Google, and Amazon as the top 3. These guys don't have any tangible assets. Fascinating. And as you go through the list of the top 100, you'll see the values that we're talking. And behind this, there's data telling us how they're valued. Again, great internal PD session here. I've grabbed one of our local ones. This is another brand consultancy, Brand Finance, who value the South African top 10. You'll see MTN there at 59.8. There's Nedbank as well. Behind this is great data about the two main metrics, the hardcore money financial aspects, but also the more intangible consumer insights that add to the value of the brand assets, the intellectual property, the big ideas that everybody is coming up with. Use them to guide you. However, there are 3 main models that all of these valuation processes use. The original cost, how much did it cost to create? Maybe you created a logo yesterday or last year. The market value is another mode of calculating, well, how much would it cost today to replicate or to buy if it did exist? And the third mode to value your intangible assets, your big ideas, would be the future revenue streams. How much is it likely to generate? Now, to give a little bit more context there, we're looking at the platforms that it would be used. Is it just in the local magazine? Is it on radio as well as television, or maybe global? What territories are we focused on? Just the local area, the suburb or county, or is it national, or is it international? And how long for? This weekend, just this conference, maybe a month, a year, 10 years. Each time you extend your idea to be bigger, last longer, it becomes more valuable because it's got to be stronger to cross all the platforms, territories, and last the distance. So let's say we now have a value. In fact, I'd recommend calculating all 3 values, and then you have a range to play with. And it's not an exact science. There are actually 39 models and some bespoke models on valuing. Brand Finance would have their own, as does Kantar, and there are many others. There are agencies that have their own bespoke models of valuation. But now we want to commercialize and sell our intellectual property, our big ideas. Well, like a house, you could sell it outright and the purchaser would pay the price for it. Alternatively, perhaps we don't want to buy it, we can't buy it, the budget didn't allow for it, we can lease it, or in our case, we can possibly license it. Take the Swoosh, for example. So back in the beginning, 1964, when the first range of 500 shoes came off the conveyor belt, Phil Knight asked Carolyn Davidson to design a logo, and this was the result. She took 17.5 hours, she came up with 6 logos, and she charged Phil $35 for this one to be used. Today, Nike is actually worth over $109 million US. I don't think Carolyn would charge $35 US for her logo. And that's because it was a startup. So $35 back then was appropriate. Now she would price the global giant, seeing this go for the platforms it's being used across the various territories global for a long duration. And so the price is very different. Here's the original photo of Michael Jordan. Again, originally it was just $150 for an internal slide deck presentation. And now the Jordan division is 11% of the Nike overall suite. We can't buy Adobe, we can license it. I can't own Mickey Mouse, but I could license it. These are assets that can all be commercialized. And they've gone through the same process. In fact, all of these ones we're looking at here, their businesses are entirely built on intangible assets. And I would go so far to say that most of the agencies attending are exactly the same. We're in many cases coming up with that initial idea, an intangible asset worth a huge amount of value to the brand owners at all the different touch points for their consumers. I hope you find this 4-step process useful, and I look forward to taking your questions and answering them as best I can. Thank you.
Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
It's fascinating talk. I hope you don't charge me too much for these questions. I'll be careful. I have a question. I have a question that I want to kick off with, which is, great ideas are often born from a tight partnership between, clients and agency. The marketing team guiding, helping to shape the work, and obviously the IP being created by the agency themselves. So how can agencies charge for the IP of something that has been created in collaboration with a marketing team?
Yeah, I guess together you've come up with the idea. So it might not be owned by a person per se, but in that original discussion or receiving the brief and the ideas that are in that initial meeting, the actual, I guess, campaign idea has not been fully formed. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, within that idea are the valuable intellectual property facets. So it would be normal to go away and the agency creatives would then come up with the tagline. Perhaps there is some colour, the senses that I mentioned, and you'll start to refine what it actually is and respond to the client, to the marketing team, with probably 1 or 2 or 3 concepts or 3 versions of, from that meeting, what we think would be relevant. And one of them will be the winner, that is going to be the linchpin of the campaign. So it's that winning idea that the agency has come up with, that's mocked up with, that basically at that stage is owning it and then looking to transfer ownership to the marketing team, to the brand. Although the brand could register the ownership of that itself, because ultimately that is the intent. So it will come down to putting a value on it and deciding at that point, how much is this idea worth?
Awesome, thank you. All right, thanks for the question. I've got one that's come from our delegates, from Rob Murdoch, a spicy one. Looking forward to this answer. Award-winning ideas have time and time proven to deliver superior commercial results for organizations. Do you believe agencies can charge a premium for award-winning teams? And if so, how would you recommend benchmarking this value? Thanks for the question, Rob.
A good one, Rob. I'm an Effie judge here in Australia with our local television advertising awards as well as graphic design. I've been following the Cannes Effectiveness Awards as well. We know through evidence of decades that a great creative idea is worth a lot to a brand. So there are, again, some of the references that I mentioned in my presentation, great references of how you ascertain what that would be worth. And can you charge a premium if you are an award-winning agency? Yeah, you've probably got a process internally to calculate that ROI and a confidence that you're going to deliver different to another agency who is not award-winning to your client, to the brand. So the brand will come to you because they see evidence and proof that you can crack the code and deliver the success message for their consumers as well. So yes, I do think you can price accordingly, and you need to educate your client, your marketing team, your partners there on why it's going to be worth a lot, and mitigate the risk by proving it with some of your past work and demonstrate it through your hardcore metrics and the consumer insights, which you would know about if you were an award winner.
Got you. Thanks, Kathryn. All right, another question from the delegates. Thanks so much for that. In the cases such as Apple, how does the copyright on the name work? And can a generic Apple then be used as example for a logo in a company, or will it be seen as the company Apple's intellectual property?
Yeah, a really great question, because you would think that you probably couldn't use an Apple because it has the world captivated by its brand. It is so powerful. You wouldn't want to use it because you would be seen to be infringing on their rights, trying to claim some benefit as a off them, on their coattails. So if you're in a completely different category, It's possible, and there is a backstory with Apple because Apple was actually owned by the Beatles, their record producing company. And so there's been lots of, you could look at the case studies that through the courts where Apple computers they contested the existence of that. And Apple computers said, well, we won't actually do anything with music. But as we all know, they eventually did. So they have a licensing agreement. So there's a possibility there again to be able to use, every time Apple sell music, there is a licensing fee that is paid across to the Apple Inc. that's owned by the Beatles, for example. So there's more details in the case that you can use. You need to be careful that you don't infringe other people's rights. That's the whole point of legal ownership and this. Because if someone's pinched your stuff, if you don't have it legally protected, if you're not using the regimes that I mentioned, then you really can't defend. You won't stand up in court because you didn't legally own it. That's why it's really important, because we're all global now. And as a CFO, a chief financial officer, a finance director for agencies, they to get our due diligence done for our clients, the marketing partners that we work with, help them understand it as well.
Amazing. Couple more questions before we wrap up. On the current time-based model, some agencies argue that excellence is punished. The faster they come up with ideas, the less they're able to charge for them. What would your first step be in trying to shift this dynamic between agencies and clients so that excellence is rewarded, not punished?
Oh, it's a great question our whole industry grapples with. We pretty much default to the hours charging method, so selling our time, because we are paying our people based on hours usually. But it's actually nothing about what I've talked about. I'm talking about the impact and the change in position that we make for brands. And that's not really anything to do with how long it took for us to come up with the idea or the excellent solution. In fact, one would say that if it is so excellent, it's worth a lot more. There's a great case study that I didn't put in the presentation I'd love you to look at. It's the Citibank one. So Paula Scher, who came up with the logo of the umbrella, there's a great YouTube video of her. She's from Pentagram in the States, how pretty much in the meeting with the client, she came up with the idea. But it wasn't, and her interview, and you can see it on YouTube, she explains it wasn't that 5-second thought that she had in the 15-minute meeting. It was 30 years, which I tried to convey also. It takes a long time to come up with a brilliant idea. So to charge it on time is not relevant for that idea. Executing it is possibly relevant. That's the time and the materials piece. Once you've got the idea, now you want to run the campaign, that execution can be on hours, and again might contest whether or not that's relevant, but try and keep them very separate. Time is not relevant when you're coming up with an excellent idea.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kathryn. One more question, which is, how do you convert an idea into revenue? This has come from Keir Claassen. Not everyone is sort of privy to patent, copyright, and trademark law. So where do you even start converting an idea into revenue?
You start really small, and I love that question because this is really new for a lot of us all across the globe. The big guys, the big brands have got it covered. That's why they're in the top 100. But the little ones and the little agencies and just us, because we're not IP lawyers, we didn't do a degree in this legal aspect. But if you look at some of the examples I gave, so the Nike one is a really good example. So Michael Jordan, that photo that was originally taken of him slam dunking, that was only $150 for temporary use. So you might have a client where that exactly is the case. It's a temporary usage piece. It's a small figure. But once it goes outside of that original parameters, then you can actually increase the charge. That same image was then used for a larger campaign on billboards for $15,000 US. So it went from 150 to 15,000 for, again, a limited period. And now the rest is history. Same with Carolyn Davidson with the little swoosh that we heard. That was $35 US. Recently, Nike did actually reward her, as you heard earlier. They gave her some shares. This was on their anniversary, and they gave her a ring with a diamond embossed swoosh. So again, a brand may say thank you later down the track, but just start small with a small value. And if you don't try and if you don't ask, you'll never know. So pick the right client that can believe that there is value in the long term, and give it a go.
Thank you, Kathryn, and thanks for your questions.